Jet engine death. On December 31, 2022, Courtney Edwards reported for her shift as a Piedmont Airlines ramp agent at Montgomery Regional Airport in Montgomery, Alabama. Edwards was 34 years old, a mother of 3, and a member of CWA Local 3645. That afternoon, Envoy Air Flight 3408, an Embraer 170 operating as American Eagle, landed from Dallas-Fort Worth carrying 63 passengers and 4 crew. Because the aircraft's auxiliary power unit was inoperative, the flight crew kept both engines running while waiting for ground power to be connected. Edwards and her fellow ramp agents gathered to marshal the jet onto the gate. The lead ramp agent conducted a safety briefing before the aircraft pulled in, making clear that no one was to approach the engines until the rotating beacon switched off. Video footage later reviewed by investigators showed Edwards repeatedly stepping in and out of the designated safety zone as the aircraft parked. After the nose wheel was chocked and the right side cargo door opened, Edwards walked along the leading edge of the left wing and directly in front of the still-running number 1 engine. In an instant, she was violently ingested, causing the aircraft to shake and the engine to shut down with a loud bang. The captain killed remaining power and activated emergency procedures. First responders arrived on the ramp, but could only pronounce Edwards dead at the scene from catastrophic injuries. OSHA issued a federal safety citation and proposed a fine of $15,625, while her union raised over $100,000 via an online fundraiser for her 3 children. Belt loader death. On August 30, 2022, baggage handling supervisor Germani Thompson arrived for her night shift at Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport in Kenner, Louisiana. Thompson was 26 years old, a former college basketball player from Reserve, Louisiana, and a supervisor for ground handling contractor GAT Airline Ground Support. Around 10:20 p.m., a Frontier Airlines flight arrived at the gate, and Thompson joined her crew on the dimly lit tarmac to begin unloading luggage. She positioned herself at a belt loader, feeding baggage from the aircraft down to the ground, a task she had performed many times before. In seconds, something went catastrophically wrong. Her long hair became entangled in the moving machinery, pulling her downward and trapping her against the conveyor components. Coworkers immediately hit emergency stops and called 911 as they realized she was critically injured and could not be freed quickly. Some accounts noted that medics later said they attempted to cut her hair at the machine before freeing her. Paramedics rushed Thompson from the ramp to Oxnard Medical Center in Kenner, but doctors were unable to reverse the trauma, and she was pronounced dead at the hospital. News of the accident spread rapidly through the airport community and national media. GAT's chief executive and the airport's director of aviation both issued statements calling the loss heartbreaking and pledging full cooperation with investigators. Thompson's mother described how she had spoken to her daughter just as she left for work that evening. Escalator fall death. On June 15, 2022, 82-year-old Gerardo Solano and his wife Irma landed at Gatwick Airport's North Terminal in West Sussex, England, after an EasyJet flight returning from a family holiday in Naples, Italy. Because of his restricted mobility, Solano had pre-booked wheelchair assistance through Wilson James, the airport's special assistance provider. A Wilson James attendant arrived to escort 3 passengers with reduced mobility, including Solano and his wife, but could only take 1 person at a time to the waiting buggy that would carry them into the terminal. Rather than wait his turn, Solano decided to make his own way, walking a short distance to an escalator that carried passengers up toward the busy concourse. Witnesses at the inquest later described hearing a woman shout, followed by screams, as Solano tripped and fell from the escalator, crashing onto the hard surface below and fracturing his spinal cord. EasyJet cabin crew and airport staff rushed to him and began emergency aid, as paramedics raced to the scene around 12:50 p.m., but his injuries proved unsurvivable, and he died shortly afterward. Sussex police confirmed the death was not suspicious and referred the case to the coroner. Gatwick launched a formal internal investigation, insisting that staff shortages had not directly contributed to his fall. At later hearings, his family described Solano as a hard-working grandfather who lived for his grandchildren and his wife, while disability advocates used his case to highlight broader failures in airport assistance systems for elderly and mobility-impaired travelers. By the way, if you find this informative, I cover stories like these regularly. Consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. Now back to the video. Propeller date death. On the night of October 16, 2022, 21-year-old Sani Aliyu, a Georgia Southern University sophomore and management major originally from Nigeria, arranged a chartered flight from Statesboro to Savannah, Georgia, as a romantic date. He hired a pilot and co-pilot to fly the group in a 2005 Cessna 172S, a single-engine aircraft operated by a local flight service. After dinner in Savannah, the group returned to Statesboro-Bullock County Airport, landing safely at about 10:35 p.m. and taxiing to the ramp with the engine and propeller still turning. As the cabin door opened, his date stepped out first and walked toward the rear of the aircraft, away from the spinning propeller, as she had been instructed. Aliyu exited next, and instead walked forward toward the nose of the plane. In a split second, he stepped into the propeller arc. The blades struck him twice in the head and once in the shoulder, killing him almost instantly, in front of his date and the crew. Bullock County EMS responded after a 911 call placed just before 10:45 p.m., but coroner Jake Futch could only pronounce Aliyu dead at the scene at 11:23 p.m., attributing the cause to severe head injuries. The FAA and NTSB both opened investigations, ultimately describing the case as an accident with no criminal fault by any party. Georgia Southern University issued a statement mourning the loss of the young student, while friends and family mourned a life cut short during a gesture meant to create a memory. Mobile lounge death. On the morning of January 26, 2012, Southwest Airlines ramp agent Jared Dodson steered his baggage tug with 4 empty carts out of the main terminal at Washington Dulles International Airport in Chantilly, Virginia, heading toward Concourse B along the designated tug route. It was dark and misty on the tarmac. Dodson was 25 years old and had worked for Southwest as a ramp agent on the busy airport's sprawling apron. He came to a complete stop at taxiway B as required, then proceeded across at low speed, his low-slung vehicle barely visible beneath the elevated cabins of the airport's towering mobile lounges. At the same moment, driver Kenneth L. Smith, Jr. piloted a 35-ton mobile lounge diagonally toward Concourse D at roughly twice Dodson's speed. Smith later told investigators he never saw the small tug below him. The lounge slammed into 2 of Dodson's empty carts, the impact hurling him and the tug violently out of position and dragging him underneath the massive vehicle's wheels, which crushed him in front of horrified coworkers. Emergency crews rushed Dodson by helicopter to an Inova hospital, where doctors fought to save him through the night. He died the following day from his injuries. Dodson's parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit, alleging serious safety flaws in how mobile lounges operated among ramp vehicles and ground crews. On the eve of trial, the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority agreed to a $2 million settlement, and the case became a key example in debates over whether Dulles should retire its aging people mover fleet. Tractor rollover death. Late on Friday, April 22, 2016, 24-year-old Air Canada station attendant Ian Pervez drove a baggage cart tractor on the apron near Terminal 3 at Toronto Pearson International Airport in Mississauga, Ontario, hauling equipment as he finished another shift at Canada's busiest airport. Around 11 p.m., the vehicle suddenly lost control, rolled, and flipped, pinning Pervez beneath it on the tarmac. Coworkers rushed over and called 911 as they realized he had been trapped and crushed. Peel Regional Police and paramedics converged on the scene, but could only pronounce him dead at the site. His family and church community, who described him as a humble young man who had recently become engaged, were devastated by the news. Federal labor and workplace safety investigators began examining not just the circumstances of the rollover, but the condition and design of Air Canada's ramp vehicle fleet nationwide. Internal bulletins and federal directives revealed the tractor had mechanical failures and lacked a functioning seatbelt, prompting an order to retrofit or repair hundreds of similar baggage trucks and tractors across Canada. Labour Canada ultimately ordered safety upgrades to approximately 950 of Air Canada's 2,200 ground vehicles following Pervez's death. In 2018, federal prosecutors laid multiple Canada Labour Code charges against Air Canada, alleging the company failed to install seatbelts, failed to remove defective vehicles from service, and did not adequately train workers to identify ramp hazards, linking each failure directly to the night Ian Pervez died. De-icing bucket fall. Just before Christmas, in the pre-dawn cold and light snow of December 21, 2009, 52-year-old Murgappa Niker arrived at Calgary International Airport in Alberta to begin his shift as a de-icing technician for Service Air. Niker was a veteran of the job, with 17 years of experience and nearly 400 de-icing operations completed in the previous season alone. He climbed into the open bucket of a Service Air modular de-icing truck to begin spraying a Canadian North Boeing 737 on an open stand away from the terminal buildings. Around 6 a.m., working alone on one side of the aircraft, Niker stood in the bucket approximately 5.5 to 6 meters above the frozen tarmac, the door facing inward, and guardrails positioned around him. At some point early in the operation, he fell from the bucket to the pavement below. No one witnessed the moment he went over, but a coworker de-icing the opposite side of the aircraft found him on the ground shortly afterward. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but could only declare him dead at the scene from blunt head trauma. Investigators from federal labor authorities and Servisair examined the truck and safety equipment, discovering that Niker had not clipped on his mandatory harness and lanyard, the only device designed to arrest a fall from the elevated bucket. Court documents later established that Servisair had clear written policies requiring harness use, and that Niker had completed updated safety training just 2 months before his death. Servisair was ultimately acquitted of Canada Labour Code violations, but safety experts widely cited the case as a sobering lesson about how even the most experienced workers can become fatally complacent with protective equipment. Missing seatbelt death. In the early morning hours of February 21, 2014, 51-year-old Cesar Valenzuela drove a baggage tug along a service road at Los Angeles International Airport, working for ground handling contractor Menzies Aviation, near the Virgin Australia terminal area. Around 5 a.m., the tug veered and struck a curb or obstacle, and without a functioning seatbelt to restrain him, Valenzuela was thrown from the vehicle onto the ramp surface. The tug, still moving, ran over him, pinning his head beneath a tire. Another worker nearby noticed an unattended tug with attached trailers, and then found Valenzuela lying motionless on the pavement beneath it. Los Angeles Fire Department paramedics arrived quickly, but could not revive him, and he was pronounced dead at the scene from blunt force trauma. Heart disease was noted as a contributing condition, but not the official cause of death. Menzies Aviation initially reported the incident to Cal/OSHA as a cardiac event, but a full investigation soon revealed that the tug's lap belt assembly was missing entirely, and that workers on the ramp routinely drove without restraints. State investigators concluded that Menzies' written safety policy did not require seatbelts across all ramp service roads, effectively permitting workers to operate tugs and industrial vehicles without restraints in clear violation of California workplace rules. Cal/OSHA cited Menzies for multiple serious violations and issued a fine of $77,250. Union advocates argued Valenzuela's death was entirely preventable and used the case to push for mandatory seatbelt enforcement across all LAX ground operations. Engine ingestion death. On the morning of January 16, 2006, Continental Airlines Flight 1515, a Boeing 737 bound for Houston, sat at Gate B9 at El Paso International Airport in Texas, with passengers already boarding. A reported oil leak on the number 2 engine prompted the airline to call in contract mechanics from Julie's Aircraft Service. 64-year-old Donald Gene Buchanan, a veteran mechanic who had held his FAA airframe and power plant certificate since 1966, was assigned to the job alongside another mechanic and a trainee. The team positioned themselves near the right engine to perform a high-power run-up test, with the aircraft pushed slightly back from the jetway, a tug still attached, and the engine spooled to approximately 70% power. At around 9:05 a.m., the trainee watched as Buchanan crouched near the outboard side of the engine, then saw his hat lift and his body suddenly pulled toward the inlet. The engine ingested Buchanan almost instantly with a loud bang. Inside the cockpit, the captain felt the vibration and immediately pulled the throttle to idle as the first officer reported that something had gone into the engine. The crew shut down power at once, but nothing could be done for Buchanan. NTSB investigators later determined he had moved forward into the suction zone without a safety tether or lanyard. The final report cited both his failure to maintain clearance and systemic shortcomings in training and procedural enforcement by contract maintenance personnel and the airline, making the case a landmark reference in aviation ground safety programs for decades afterward. If you found value in this, a subscription helps me continue researching these stories. Thanks for watching.